All right, tonight we're going to talk about literal equations. Literal equations are basically when you take a real equation and you solve it for a particular variable, okay? So if we want to sort of explain it here, we'll say when you solve for an identified variable in a formula. That's basically what it is. All right, and this is like we've talked about before. It's a pretty big part of algebra, and you're gonna have to do it here. And when you get into chemistry, particularly physics, for sure, you're gonna have to do this a lot in physics. So we got to get good at it now. All right, so if I look at this first example here, it says the formula for area of a triangle is A equals a half b times h. We know b is base and h is height. Now wants us to solve for h. So the very first thing I want you to do when you're doing these is kind of put a circle around what you want to solve for, or a square. I said circle, we'll go square. And so this is the one. This identifies what we're solving for, and this is what has to be left when we're finished with our math, okay? The second really good thing to do is to write what's happening around it, okay? This is 1/2 times b times h. So this problem all has multiplying on it. And so we know the opposite of multiplying, because we're trying to undo what is there, would be to divide. So in this case, we're going to have to divide. So I'm going to divide by 1/2, and I'm going to divide by 2. Or b, excuse me, I said 2. Still having issues here. All right, so if I divide 1/2 by 1/2, you know, any number to divide by itself is 1, right? And if I divide b by b, again, that would be 1. And that would get rid of h's problems there. But then again, what we do to this side, we must also do to this side, okay? So we can have h equals a over 1/2 b. But here comes those fraction things again. When you're, oops, hello, what happened here? Sorry. When you're dividing by a fraction, you're really multiplying by its reciprocal, right? So really, when I have 1/2 divided by 1/2, it's 1. But really, we have 1/2 times its reciprocal, or 2 over 1. So when we're dividing by 1/2, it's the same thing as multiplying by 2, okay? So when you have, there's a 1 here in front of that a, so you really have 1 divided by 1/2 here. And then you know when you multiply fractions, that becomes 1 times 2 over 1 over 2. So we really need to simplify this as 2a over b equals h. And I could approach this a little bit easier by multiplying through by 2 first and then dividing by b, but either way is acceptable, okay? So let's look at another example. Let's look at the area of a circle, okay? So hopefully you know already the area of a circle is a equals pi r squared. And it wants me to solve for r. So I have to get rid of the pi and the squared. So I'm dealing with pi times, so I'm dealing with multiplication. And then I'm also dealing with a squared, or an exponent. So when I think about this, I got to do the opposites, right? So just as we said before, the opposite of multiplication is I'm going to divide to get rid of that. And the opposite of squared is the square root. Hopefully you know that. If I have 2 squared, that equals 4. The square root of 4 equals 2. So you see how they undo each other. So first let's start with this divide. So I'm going to divide by pi because it's times pi. So that crosses me off, but I must also divide by pi here. So now I'm left with a over pi equals r squared. And then remember, we said the opposite of squared is the square root. So if I square root both sides, I would have r, because when you square root something, I could even write this like this. 2 to the second power, the square root of that is 2. So anything squared, the square root would be 2. And then I can't simplify this side anymore, so it would be a over pi. So the radius equals the square root of a over pi. Alright, so I'm going to give you a few minutes excuse me, to work on a couple of these on your own. I expect them to be in your notes, and I expect them to have work. I would like for you to circle or square what you're trying to find, write down the operation, and then write down the opposite that you'll need to do, just as I did in the examples above. So you have 3 of them here to work out. All right, so the first one, you need to write the formula for volume and solve for W. Then we need to solve for H in the volume of a cylinder. Remember our little notes about squared. And this last one you might have a little bit of trouble with. This is r to the third, so that's, we'll see how much you know about that. But that would be a cube root instead of a square root. And so give that one a try to your best of your abilities, and then we'll talk about it tomorrow. Good night.